Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm John Cudd, joined by my co-host Patrick Fitzgerald. Today we're going to go over the latest news, and there's a lot of news because the trade deadline was just earlier this week. We're still going to cover some player performances from the previous week, and of course give some streamer recommendations at the end of the show. Before we get into all that, Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm doing well overall. The Orioles are still playing okay baseball despite being, like mild sellers at the trade deadline, which was understandable but also disappointing. Definitely excited about the return that we got for Adley Rutschman, but very sad to see him go. It was kind of supposed to be the face of the new, golden generation of Orioles baseball. So that was, a tough pill to swallow, but they're still staying in it right in the thick of the wild card race. And I feel like my teams are having a pretty good week. Just looking to make some pushes into the playoffs or climb up the standings for those season-long leagues. But yeah, that's where I'm at. How about you?
Doing all right. The Twins were kind of buyers at the deadline, if you can call it that. We got Dean Kramer from your Orioles, which I can't say I'm too excited about that move, but he actually had a decent start yesterday for the Twins, so I'll take that. Jeff Hoffman from the Blue Jays. That's a pretty big move, I think, at least in terms of our bullpen. But it kind of always just goes back to the fact that hey, we just completely tore down the bullpen last year, and here we are this year trying to build it up. And it's kind of the joke of just like, why did we trade? Why did we trade for Jeff Hoffman when we could have just kept Louis Varland last year? So just one of those double-edged swords, I guess, of the fire sale followed by the slight buyer market that the Twins went through. But yeah, they haven't necessarily looked good after all these trades, which is unfortunate. But that is what it is. Maybe it takes some time for the team just to gel together. Fantasy teams wise, I'm in the thick of the playoffs right now. A real tight race between me. I'm the 8th seed, and I'm playing the 1 seed this week. And I'm living and dying by every baseball game right now. So unfortunately, I'm facing PCA, and he hit 2 homers
Mm.
yesterday, and that just did not go well. Thankfully, I had Shohei Ohtani on my team, so he hit 2 homers at least as well. So it wasn't as bad of a hit. But the Dylan Cease start today, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that is putting me on edge right now because he's getting a lot closer in some of these ratios that I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, those playoff leagues, they're fun, but also very stressful. Sometimes it feels like you're, spend all season building up your team, making it as good as you can. And sometimes it just lays an egg for, a few days and that can be that. But sometimes you hit the right hot streak and you go all the way. So it's definitely a little tense sometimes. I get it.
Yeah, I'm just hoping I'm like the Cincinnati Reds last year, right? Just not great the entire season, but you hit a certain month, and all of a sudden you're the best team in baseball. You climb into not exactly like, did they get to the last wild card spot? I can't remember if they actually got into it.
I think they lost to the Dodgers, right, in the first round of the playoffs. So they did
I
make it.
think so. Yeah, either was I know it was just kind of a race between how how many games can the Mets lose and how many games can the Reds win, basically, to decide that last wild card spot. But yeah, that's kind of how it feels like right now. I'm just uh, playing with house money, but at the same time, would be nice to eke out a win in the playoffs.
Yeah, pull off the upset.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into the rest of the episode, just a reminder that you can follow our podcast on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. You can send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform you listen to. We're on all of them: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Before we get into all the trade deadline madness, we still need to talk about injuries because there are quite a few notable guys hitting the injury list and coming back from the injury list this week. Starting with placements, Nick Kurtz, he has a strained right thumb, so he's going to be out for the foreseeable future right now. Um, Obviously, a big blow, one of the better first basemen this year, but yeah, that's going to hurt, especially if right. This part of the season is really important, and losing a power bat like Kurtz is going to hurt. Hunter Green back on the injury list, dealing with some elbow discomfort. A little bit of a blow there, obviously, but he's kind of been in and out of the injured list this entire season. So maybe not the worst thing if on your fantasy teams, if you've been able to deal with this injury, basically this absence from Hunter Green in this entire season. Trey Savage, he's got a knee injury. Kind of unfortunate for him just this year. Has not been able to stay healthy consistently, but did have some bright spots. I think he had a really good start prior to going on the injury list with this injury. So really unfortunate that he's dealing with this. James Wood, he had a mild oblique strain a couple days ago, and that's ended up with him on the injury list as well. Jeffrey Springs, he's got some hip discomfort. He's on the injury list. And then Dalton Rushing got right elbow inflammation. He is now on the injury list as well. So, yeah, definitely some notable names here. Big contributors like Kurtz and Wood for certain. And then, on the pitching side, Green, Savage, definitely guys who have good stuff. And it's tough to see them not being able to play for at least a couple weeks.
Yeah, Green just shaping up to be a lost season, and it's so tough if you like stash him on the IL and then he goes down. But it is related, probably, right? It was bone spurs, I think, or loose bodies in the elbow, and he goes down with the elbow inflammation. So some guys like Skubal come back looking great, at least so far, but other guys, it can take a little bit more time, and there can be setbacks. So that hurts. And then Dalton Rushing, that one killed me. He was like scratched on Sunday, day to day. He's a catcher in one of my fab leagues, and I was like, okay, like that's fine. I can, if he misses a couple games, I'll take the 0, whatever. He goes in the IL on Monday immediately, and then he's like, oh, you might have a torn UCL, and it's just like, all right, I guess that one escalated pretty quickly on me. So I'll be dropping him this week, but can't get those zeros back, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's always hard in those types of weekly leagues. It's just such a brutal format sometimes, and not being able to replace your guy if he goes down at the wrong time.
Yeah, and I was
Uh,
tracking the trades very closely, right up to lineup lock. I think I, figured everything out, but it was definitely, especially the Reed Detmers, will he, won't he saga. That one
oh
was,
my
I was taking
goodness.
him in and out of my lineups pretty much a couple times throughout the afternoon on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, we won't talk about that during the trade section, but I will say I was somewhat excited that he was going to go to the Cubs, and then finding out that that was not a real trade was a little annoying to figure out nonetheless. All right, in terms of some injury list returns, Bobby Witt Jr. probably the biggest name on this board. He came back and did a number on my Twins. Basically, he was able to kind of pull through. I think he got an RBI or something like that in that game. So unfortunate for my fandom, but good for anyone who has Bobby Witt Jr. on their team. Hopefully, you activated him in time. Kyle Harrison came back for the Brewers on Wednesday. 5 innings, 10 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 hit, and no earned runs. Great start for him. Clay Holmes, he is set to be activated on Saturday for his Cubs debut. He was on the injury list with New York, got traded, and now he's with the Cubs. We'll talk about that a little bit. Jackson Jobe of the Tigers, I think we mentioned him last week, but he is set to be activated on Saturday for his season debut. That'll be exciting for sure. Obviously, Jobe, a lot of promise, but after going down with Tommy John, I believe, it's going to be interesting to see how he looks in his first start back. Brendan Donovan activated on the 4th, so Tuesday. He's back for the Cards, and then Cody Bradford activated yesterday, Wednesday. Had a decent start in Texas. He's going to be one of those interesting guys that I'll keep an eye on as the season goes on, just because of the park that he plays in. I think it wasn't necessarily an exciting start from him. I think he went 5 innings, if I remember correctly. Sorry, it was 4.1 innings, 5 strikeouts, 2 walks, 5 hits, but no earned runs. So, I think he'll be a very interesting guy to keep an eye on, and would not be surprised in some of these deeper fab leagues like FBC if it'll be a little bit of a fight to get him on your roster. Ben Joyce, he's back from shoulder surgery. He's been out for a while with the Angels, but is fully back with the team. His velo was up to 101.3 miles an hour in his rehab appearances. So clearly the velocity is there. I think the question is just whether command is going to be there. The Angels did trade away Ryan Zephyr-John, so there's going to be save opportunities at least for Joyce in Los Angeles when they occur. And then JT Ginn back for the A's, 6 innings, 5 strikeouts, 2 walks, 5 hits, and 3 earned runs in his return to the majors. So, yeah, some big returns. Definitely some pitchers who are going to be interesting to keep an eye on for sure. But yeah, anyone out of these group of guys that's kind of notable, other than I guess Bobby Witt.
Yeah, I think JT has some streamer intrigue, but you got to be careful, with the home park. But he's had some good results this year. Ben Joyce seemingly, kind of has had the Angels closer job. The runway kind of cleared for him. Yates and Zephyr John both gone at the deadline. Of course, it's a question of how many saves the Angels are going to generate, but it's good to know that he's back. And then, yeah, it'll just be fun to see Jobe and Holmes too, just back on the mound. Extended absences for both, but especially for Joe, who hasn't been on the mound since like midseason last year. And yeah, Kyle Harrison got right back to it. So the Brewers, they didn't get Skubal, unfortunately, but they are, kind of looking to load up that rotation down the stretch, and they added another arm that we will be talking about later too. So yeah, they're looking pretty good.
Yeah. Some other injury news. guys who are on rehab stints right now: Jordan Lawler, Michael Soroka, Justin Martinez. So trio of Diamondbacks right there. Zach Geloff, Carlos Rodon is starting his rehab this weekend, and then Nick Pivetta and Joe Musgrove for the Padres. I believe both of those guys starting their rehab. So hopefully all those guys can be coming back soon. Rodon, I think he recently went down, if I'm not mistaken. And so it'd be nice to have him back. And Pavetta's had a not the greatest season, I think, when he was been healthy, but all those guys definitely contributors on fantasy if when they're back healthy. Joe Ryan, there's going to be, maybe by the time this episode comes out, it'll be all resolved, but he currently has a mild glute strain. And it seems likely that he could be sent to the injured list. Zebby Matthews was scratched from his AAA start, which is kind of important because Zebby actually got optioned earlier this week because of some of the trades that happened. So the only way he can get back to the majors, of course, is if there is someone sent to the injured list. So kind of important that he was scratched, and there's no news about Zebby having an injury either. And the guys who are currently day-to-day, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Jake Bauers, and Jordan Walker. I think we talked about Bauers last week already. He's kind of dealing with a broken toe, if I believe if that's correct, or something. So he's already dealing with injury. I guess it's flared up for him a little bit, but all those guys. I mean, we were just talking pre-show. Vladdy's been just rough this season. So even if he is day to day, I mean, it might actually be just good for fantasy managers if he goes on the injury list, so you don't have to think about whether you want to start him. But yeah, it's just been a full season of ups and downs for Vladdy, both injury, both health wise, and also just playing wise.
Yep, he's definitely been dragging me down a couple spots, and the batting average, not even necessarily empty average anymore. The average isn't enough to really, offer much value. So it's been frustrating. But yeah, all those guys who are on rehab, I think maybe Lawler, he's a little bit lower tier than some of the other guys, but everyone else I would say is pretty much worth a stash. Justin Martinez, we haven't seen on the mound in a long time, but we know the stuff's nasty and that the Diamondbacks don't really have a locked in closer right now. So if you're desperate for saves down the stretch, he's still a couple outings away, I think, but you could see him. And then, yeah, a lot of pitchers, on their way back. And some of them, Soroka especially, I think is pretty close. So it's going to be nice to see them back on the mound. Hopefully they can stay healthy for the rest of the year.
Because of the trade deadline, a lot of shuffling in terms of rosters. So just a kind of a group of guys who got optioned. So Zebby Matthews, as we mentioned, he got optioned down to AAA. Quinn Matthews, after his start, sent back. J.R. Ritchie, Koji Rojas from the Twins, J.P. Sears from the A's. Actually, no, he's with the Padres now. Kevin Alcantara from the Cubs. He was up for basically like 4 days, but it would have been nice to see if the Cubs were going to let him go a little bit longer, but it didn't. Anthony Volpe is no longer the starting shortstop for the Yankees because George Lombard Jr. is now called up, and then Emmett Sheehan kind of maybe, I don't know if it was writing on the wall or just kind of the unfortunate roster size limits, right? Like he basically got sent down because of the Skubal trade. We already kind of mentioned a little bit about Sheehan last week, how there's been some struggles for him this year, so he got sent down. In terms of promotions, Angel Hanao, who had a really fun debut, I believe it was 4 hits or something like that in his first game up. George Lombard Jr. hit a homer in his first game in the majors. That's quite impressive. Augustine Ramirez, he's back for the Marlins after they traded Liam Hicks. And then Braxton Garrett, who was traded to the Cubs, he also got called up. It's more likely he's going to be in a long relief role, though. There doesn't seem to be space in that rotation right now for an extra starter. So probably wouldn't go out and grab Garrett right now. But, as soon as the first injury goes down, I think Garrett's an interesting pickup because now he's in Chicago. And then this wasn't necessarily an injury promotion, but Kay Povich did also get promoted back to the majors with, I believe, the Dean Kramer trade. That was probably the reason why. 6 innings, 7 strikeouts, 1 walk, 7 hits, and no earned runs. So really solid start for him back in the majors. So it'd be nice to see if Povich is able to kind of make something out of this the rest of this season.
Yeah, he gets, I think, the Rangers this weekend in a potentially nice streaming spot, but then Chris Bassett is almost back from his rehab assignment, so we're not sure if Povich is going to hold the spot, but time will tell. And then, yeah, some nice promotions. Ramirez, unfortunately, hasn't been cracking the lineup really since he got back up, so it was because of the Liam Hicks trade, I think, is why he's back up, but maybe not the regular playing time for him yet. And now it seems like, yeah, he's going to be kind of a bench utility bat, but George Lombard Jr. is looking like close to the everyday shortstop for the Yankees, so
Yeah.
could have some appeal there, but obviously that offense has been scuffling a little bit without Judge, so it's not necessarily like, he's just going to rack up a ton of counting stats. But he did, I think, hit a home run his first career game, so he's off to a nice start.
Yeah. All right, we are going to recap a bunch of trades. Basically, it's been a busy week, just trying to get our heads wrapped around everything that's happened with the trade deadline. Obviously, it's been a pretty busy trade deadline, I think, relative to other years, and some very big names getting moved, of course, and some new spots for a lot of players that could be very interesting. So we're going to run through most of the trades. We're definitely not going to cover all of them. But yeah, just kind of discuss the fantasy implications and how we, like the guy in his new spot. So we're going to start with the big one, which is Tarik Skubal to the Dodgers. So, reigning Cy Young winner going to LA. He did actually start in Dodger Blue already. He faced the Cubs a couple days ago. I think he went 6 innings, had 2 earned runs. The wind was blowing out that day, so a little unfortunate that Wrigley wasn't working in his favor. But did have 6 strikeouts, 2 walks, 4 hits, 2 earned runs in a loss. But look, Skubal, I think moving from Detroit to the Dodgers, I think the nice thing obviously is that he's going to probably have a better chance at wins, right? It's the Dodgers. But I don't know if anything else notable really is going to change with the rest of his stats with this move.
Yeah, I think overall it's just kind of a neutral. He gets definitely the wins chance boost, and I think maybe he'll just pitch a little bit less often than he was with the Tigers. I don't think the Dodgers aren't running a hard 6-man rotation right now because Ohtani isn't pitching, but they do still have a couple of Japanese pitchers who are used to pitching once a week, and they're also about to get Blake Snell off the IL and Tyler Glass now potentially not far behind, though you never know with him. They also traded for Chris Bubich, so they're just loading up, but I could see him, starting every 6th or 7th day as opposed to every 5th or 6th day like he was with the Tigers. But I think that the added win chance kind of, balances that out and makes it a neutral. In terms of takeaways from his first outing, he actually did get the loss, even though he had a good outing. So, the Tarik Skubal Dodgers aren't completely unstoppable. The Cubs did take him down. Pitch usage, looks like he just threw a couple more sinkers than 4-seamers, which his season usage is 36% on the 4-seam and 20 on the sinker. So I don't know if that's a Dodgers thing or maybe he just felt like he was commanding it better that day. But it's always interesting to see if a guy in a new spot is tweaking the repertoire at all. But that's really the only major change. The other kind of secondary usage was pretty consistent with what he's been doing so far this season.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much to take away here in terms of fantasy other than he'll have a better chance at wins and he might have fewer starts, which I think the fewer starts probably is going to have the bigger impact. Obviously, in Skubal, you're probably not going to get any two-week starts from him or 2-game starts from him at this point, unless more injuries happen to the Dodgers rotation, which is certainly possible. But yeah, that's going to be maybe a slight blow to the fantasy value, but still, he's Tarik Skubal. Every time he goes out, you're going to be pretty happy with what he gives you.
Yeah, next week they have a 7-game week, and it looks like he's penciled to start Monday. So if you are ever going to get a 2-star week, it might have to be that perfect scenario where it's 7 games and he gets Monday and Sunday. So this might be the only one you get, honestly. So enjoy it.
All right, next trade, Luis Arraez to the Phillies. This is a fun one, I think, partially because he's not batting leadoff. He is batting 4th in the order for Philadelphia. And funny enough, he actually hit a homer in yesterday's game. So, I don't know. This is kind of a fun little situation for Arraez. The lineup obviously is so much better for him, just because it's just a lot more dangerous than San Francisco. But yeah, this is kind of a funny group of guys that he's now batting behind, which would be Kyle Schwarber, and then it's Bryce Harper, and then I believe batting 3rd is who is it? It is
Trey Turner's been up there sometimes.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Turner sometimes bats 2nd, and then Harper 3rd. But regardless, a kind of a mix of those 3 guys, and then Luis Arraez in the cleanup spot, which I think is just it's so fun because it actually like allows him to use the hit tool to like get more counting stats, which is nice. He's had let's see, he had 1 RBI today, and his last couple games, I think it's been a combined 3 RBIs. So he's had 4 RBIs in 3 games so far, which That's not really Luis Rice's game. He doesn't necessarily get a ton of RBIs. I think he has it's 46 on the season right now. So, um, yeah, I don't know if he stays in this number 4 spot. Arraez somehow then actually gains a little bit more value for me, right? Obviously the batting average is elite, but I think the counting stats were always just maybe not as great as you'd like him to be. But now that he's in this a little bit more potent offense, I think this is actually a little bit more of a fun second baseman to pick up.
Yeah, him hitting cleanup while Kyle Schwarber's batting leadoff is just so fun. It's just the complete opposite of what you maybe would expect in a lineup like 15 or 20 years ago, or what, traditional baseball knowledge would suggest, but it's working for them so far, and Arraez is producing, like you said. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a boost for his value. The Phillies' offense isn't as amazing as maybe it has been in past years, but they've been playing a little better, and obviously Arraez is going to help lengthen the lineup out. So, yeah, I think it'll only help him. I'll wonder if he's gonna keep stealing. He's 10 for 10 on the bases this year, and he's one away from his career high, which was 11 last year. So hopefully he keeps like kind of chipping in there. But otherwise, yeah, I think that this will only help his value. He's been back to that elite batting average asset that you've come to expect. In 324, the 4% strikeout rate. So definitely a good bat for the Phillies to add to kind of lengthen their lineup.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like what his rostership rate looks like. Just, I mean, being a second baseman, you expect it to be a little higher. It looks like according to Fantasy Pros, he's rostering like 86% of leagues, so it's still pretty high. You're probably not going to find him on your waiver wire, but yeah, I think he's just going to gain value because of this move. So we'll see how it kind of rolls out for the rest of the year. We're gonna next move to the Padres, who picked up Casey Mize and Robbie Ray. Casey started yesterday's game. It was a bit of a clunker, 3.1 innings, 1 strikeout, 3 walks, 9 hits, and 8 earned runs. He moves from Detroit, so in terms of park, it's not really that much of a better move. Robbie Ray moved from San Francisco to San Diego, also more of a kind of a lateral move in terms of your park improvement. So, yeah, what do you like about these two moves? I think, for the most part, I don't know if I call them boring. I think both Mize and Ray are guys who are kind of teetering on the edge of like guys that you'd probably roster on your fantasy team, but you probably wouldn't mind dropping as well if they had a bad start.
Yeah, the Padres, they're trying to hold on to competing, and they just need to round out their rotation. I mean, they had like Canning and Bueller and Herman Marquez and just a bunch of not great names in there behind Michael King, who's even had some struggles. So they really just need to round out their rotation here. But yeah, both of these guys were already pitching in good parks and having decent seasons. So I don't think there's a huge change in the value either way. Got a feel for Mize, like, coming to a new place. It's his first time in a different organization. And of course you want to, put on a good show for the fans and make a good impression. It's just his worst start of the season by a mile. So that's gotta hurt. But I didn't see anything that like suggested, that this is just gonna continue for him. So hopefully he can bounce back. Looks like he's got a 2 start next week, most likely, home against the Brewers and at the Guardians. And, given how good he's been on the whole this year, I'd feel good about giving that one, a run in pretty much every league.
Yeah, it's that offense. I mean, Joram is not hurt. I think he was day to day, but he actually came back and played. But yeah, the offense in general still not necessarily elite, even though they did make some additions that are interesting. We'll talk about a little bit in a bit. But next trade, Foster Griffin going from the Nationals to the Guardians. He also started yesterday, 4 innings, 6 strikeouts, 2 walks, 7 hits, but 5 earned runs. So not the greatest debut with your new team. Griffin, for him, he came over from the Nippon Professional Baseball League last year to sign with the Nats this year, and has had a pretty decent season, 3.31 ERA, 1.11 WHIP. So it's no surprise that Washington traded him. He's 12 wins on the season as well. Going to Cleveland, which, kind of known as, the pitching whispering team, but for a guy who's 31, that's not necessarily what he needs at this point. So ultimately, I think this is a decent move. I don't know if this really changes anything about his prospects in terms of fantasy. Maybe he gets more wins, but he already had 12 in Washington, so I don't think that's necessarily going to be a huge bump for him here. And it's not like his the guys behind him, right? The offense behind him is really actually better than what we have in Washington, as we kind of mentioned. So yeah, kind of an interesting move here. But overall, the Guardians needed more pitching, and they got their guy. But I don't know if this has any real impact with regards to fantasy.
Yeah, tough outing today or yesterday. Another one, new guy making a rough start in his debut, but it's at Detroit next week, and then looks like could be home against the Giants the week after that. So both, matchups that I'd feel pretty good about. This is a rough start for him, but I think it's his first time allowing more than 3 runs in a start in over 2 months, almost 3 months. So he's just been in such a nice groove that I don't think you can just let him go or bench him after one start. So I think he's staying in your lineups until you see at least one more of these. So yeah, I feel good about this one. And yeah, Cleveland's rotation is looking really strong, making this addition. Obviously, Gavin Williams has been having a lot of success, and Tanner Bybee's been eating innings. So they're looking pretty good, in the battle for the AL Central right now.
Yeah, and don't forget the Twins. We're like 1 or 2 games behind.
Yeah, they're right there.
We're just lurking.
They're right there.
Yeah. All right, next, another pitcher trade. This one actually was going to be kind of interesting. Kevin Gausman going to the Cubs. The Cubs and the Blue Jays were playing a makeup game today, and Gausman almost started in that one, but he was moved from that start. But yeah, this is kind of an interesting one because Gausman not exactly having the greatest season, as we've discussed on this pod plenty of times. 5 wins, 10 losses this year. But kind of the notable numbers: 4.38 ERA. He had a 1.29 WHIP. Strikeout rate was out in, let's see, where's the strikeout rate? 23%, 23.5% specifically. So not necessarily elite numbers like we've seen from Gausman before, but decent ones. But now he goes to a park that when the wind is right, it is a boon for pitchers, and so I think this is going to only help his fantasy prospects. I think going to Chicago.
Yeah, I agree. Wrigley can be a little bit dodgy maybe in the summer sometimes with some of the weather and the wind blowing out, but the Cubs are really known for having a super strong defense. So obviously at PCA, just covering a ton of ground in center field, and then Nico Horner is a really slick defender too. So yeah, I think that this situation will only help him. I don't think it's necessarily a huge park change, but the defense change, and then maybe a little bit more of a wins chance. But also, I know that Kevin Gausman really loved Toronto, and it's really hard for him to leave. So you have to think of it from the human perspective a little bit as well. Really hard to quantify that, but just something that I was also thinking about is how tough it can be to transition midseason. And the Blue Jays, they're an above average defense too. I know Ernie Clement, Andres Jimenez, Dalton Varsho, who's not on the Blue Jays anymore, but was a really good fielder. So slightly better defense, but still he was, had some good fielders behind him in Toronto too. So yeah, I think this will be maybe a little bit better of a situation for Gausman. But his fluctuations, I feel like, are more usually related to himself rather than, tough opponents or the context. So hopefully he can just kind of get back in that groove that, we see so often from him, even though he's only a 2-pitch guy.
Yeah, it probably helps that he's not facing his former team, and I think won't for the rest of the season. So, yeah, I will like this move. I think, not necessarily that there's going to be any difference in terms of coaching or anything like that, but yeah, it'd be fun to see Gausman kind of do well again, and be on a. Not that last year Toronto was an incredible team, and it's kind of unfortunate that they haven't been able to match that this year. But nonetheless, it'll be nice to see Gausman kind of pitching in a competitive environment with Chicago at least. So we're going to talk about another move. This is within the AL East of Luis Garcia Jr. going to the Yankees. Yankees who basically just traded like half a bullpen for Garcia Jr. He was having a really solid year this year. 24 homers. That's really good for him. Obviously part of that Nationals offense that just kind of came out of nowhere. 78 RBIs on the season. Just kind of continuing and being really good in terms of his plate discipline. Only a 16% strikeout rate. 283 average. That's a career high for him as well. So, yeah, one of the better second basemen for sure in baseball right now. And now he goes to Yankee Stadium. He does bat left, so maybe that's a little bit of a help for him. But also joins a lineup that, as you kind of mentioned earlier, is a little bit of a flux, right? That they're fine, but they're not elite, especially after losing Judge. I mean, Jazz is still a really good source of offense in that on that roster. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what you think about Luis Garcia's move to uh, New York and whether this is a good or bad move for him.
Yeah, I think it kind of raises the floor but lowers the ceiling. I say raise the floor just because it is a lot, it's easier for lefties to hit home runs in Yankee Stadium. So I think that his newfound power is going to continue to play there. But he's still going to be in the platoon like he pretty much was in Washington. Paul Goldschmidt's like a really natural platoon partner there for him. And then lowers the ceiling just because the Yankees, Judge's return is not around the corner, and they've really struggled without him. So I think that the counting stats aren't going to be as exceptional as they were in that league-leading Nationals offense. Obviously, that was a surprising league-leading offense. It's not necessarily what we were expecting, but they had been doing it for long enough that you got to kind of buy into it to some extent. So, yeah, I think that it just maybe narrows his range of outcomes for the rest of the season. And yeah, the Yankees, it looks like they have 7 lefties in their typical starting lineup with 4 righties on the bench. So a lot of platooning going to be going on there that, might hurt Garcia a little bit because I think he was playing against a couple of lefties in Washington, but he struggles against them anyway. So I don't think it's a huge deal that he's going to be pretty hard platooned.
Yeah, one thing to keep an eye out too is Garcia has second base eligibility right now, but he has not played second base at all this season. He's only played first in DH, so that's going to hit his fantasy value next year for sure. And the team that he's on right now, the Yankees, they've got a pretty good second baseman, so they're not going to move him over to second base. And so, like you said, be playing that first base position, it's just more natural that they're going to switch him out for Goldschmidt if the pitching matchup makes sense.
Yeah, I think first base might be reclaiming its title as the deepest position in fantasy baseball after this year. It's been an impressive year for first base.
Yeah. And guys like Vlad end up getting. There's just so many
Vlad
guys that are just like, oh
notwithstanding,
yeah,
yeah.
he's better now. All right. This is going to be kind of a interesting trade for you for sure. Adley Rutschman going from the Orioles to the Red Sox. Obviously the Red Sox paid a haul for Adley, trading top prospects for him. But obviously still a huge move because Adley was the kind of the face of the franchise in Baltimore, and now he goes to Boston, and he's also still not healthy, right? He is still on the injury list there. So um, this is kind of a weird, I don't know, fantasy sort of question because we don't know what it's going to look like for him when he joins the team there. But yeah, I guess just, looking at him in Boston, like, is there any sort of positive things that you might see with this move, or is it just, we'll kind of see what happens at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Red Sox offense has been a lot better than the Orioles offense lately. Obviously, the Red Sox are just playing great baseball. And the Orioles have had one of the worst offenses since the All-Star break, but they're still playing well because the pitching has been great. So, yeah, I think that will kind of raise Adley up a little bit once he comes back. But I don't think he's, starting a rehab assignment like, immediately. So it's not around the corner, like you said, and catcher is deep enough that, he's probably at best a back end catcher one in like a 12, 15 teamer. So, yeah, I think that this maybe helps his value a little bit in fantasy, but might take a little bit of time to kind of reap the reward. But yeah, it's gonna be weird to see him in a Red Sox jersey. That's for sure. I'm definitely more okay with that than the Yankees though, because I know those are kind of the 2 leading
Yeah.
contenders. So that would have been a tough pill to swallow. This one's still gonna be weird, but yeah, wish him all the best. It's just crazy, that how fast things can change in this game. You'd think that maybe he'll be around for a long time, and then trade deadline comes and they get a great offer and they send him to a division rival. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how he deals with um hitting in Boston, right? Obviously, you got the monster. That's great. But he's a switch hitter, right? So he generally kind of will prefer to attack the pitching matchups as opposed to just, being a righty and just trying to pull the ball into the monster. So curious how that's going to affect his stats. But at the end of the day, I mean, part of it is just like the reason the Orioles moved on was he wasn't that kind of all-star level catcher that we expected from a couple years back, and basically since um, that injury or kind of supposed injury that I think we eventually discovered, yeah, actually was there. He just hasn't been. He hasn't looked like that player for a long time. So I'm curious how that's going to really affect his value. when he is playing in Boston, if we're going to just kind of see the same player, or if there's going to be some improvement that we see based on just being in a different offense and a different park.
Yeah, I think he profiles, more as a solid kind of back end fantasy option, but just his value is going to come a lot more just from being a leader and a solid defender and an on-base guy. So, he does more in the real life context and the fantasy context at this point, I'd say.
Yeah. I think maybe a big impact of this move, of course, is that Samuel Basallo is now your everyday catcher in Baltimore. But I think for him, I don't know. The knock is right. His defense just was not as good as Adley's. Right. That was the one thing that made Adley valuable, was that like, hey, he played defense really well even if he wasn't hitting. So I'm kind of curious to see how the Orioles are going to manage Basallo, if he's going to be their everyday catcher, if they're going to try to do some stuff there where he is still DHing and catching, and switching between those roles throughout the season.
Yeah, they did get Carlos Narvaez back in this deal, so he's a kind of a competent backup catcher with a lot of team control. So I think they're hoping that they can be a little bit of a tandem back there, with Basallo obviously getting more volume between catcher and DH.
Yeah. All right. We mentioned this at the top of the show, but Clay Holmes, he got traded to the Cubs from the Mets. He has not played since mid-May, when he went down with a lower leg injury. Clay Holmes, I really liked what I saw from him last year. I mean, the strikeouts were just never going to be the biggest thing for him, but the fact that he was able to pitch 165 innings was impressive. The ERA wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. It was a 3.53 ERA. WHIP was not great, 1.3 there. But nonetheless, he now is in Chicago. Kind of the same things that we talked about Gausman, right? Like, depending on how the wind is at Wrigley, that could be really good for him. He is a ground ball pitcher in the sense that he's got a 56% ground ball rate. So that offense behind him, the defense behind him, I should say, that could be really good for him. He does move from Citi Field, which is generally known as a better pitcher's park, to Wrigley, which is kind of variable depending on how the wind blows. But yeah, I mean, we haven't seen Clay Holmes pitch in basically 3 months. So I'm really curious how this is going to work for him now in Chicago, after this basically long time since we've actually seen him throw off a mound.
Yeah, I think it's a decent destination for him. Maybe like the Brewers would have been a little better, just because we know how much success they can have with any pitcher. Basically, they get their hands on. But yeah, I'm excited to see him finally get back on the mound. I know. I think it was last week I said I basically have him in every single league. I'm not starting him in my weekly leagues. My daily ones I probably will, but it's not. He's not the type of guy that's so dominant that you're just going to go and plug him back in immediately. His rehab assignment, like his results were decent but not amazing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to just seeing what it looks like, seeing him get built back up, and it's nice to get a look at him this weekend to see if you want to put some fab on him or add him if he's still out there in some of your leagues. But yeah, I think he could be a good innings eater for the Cubs here down the stretch, like you said, a lot of ground balls, and hopefully those really strong defenders can just kind of eat those up and he can mow through these lineups. But maybe a little whip risk because of the ground ball and walk rate. But I feel pretty good about him overall.
Yeah. I have no idea how he's going to pitch there because we just don't have any real history about him right now this season. So excited to see how that goes for him. All right, the Guardians added 2 power bats in Joe Adell and Nathaniel Lowe. Annoyingly, Lowe hit I believe it was a walk-off homer against the Twins or something. Oh no, sorry, he was against the Mets and he ruined Nolan McLean's day. Yeah, that's why I'm mad at him. Nonetheless, both those guys slot right into the middle of the order for the Guardians. Joe Adell batted second and third in his first 2 games. In Cleveland, Lowe batted fourth, and both of those guys are. I think it's nice. I think they give a little bit of a jolt to this Guardians offense that we've really talked about how kind of just anemic it is, and they don't really do much. Adell this year, even after, he had the breakout season last year, right? 37 homers, really solid numbers there. This year, 16 homers on the season, but he's actually brought down his strikeout rate to 24%, which is kind of impressive. 238 average, so kind of similar numbers to last year, just hasn't had the power. And then as for Lowe, he's kind of bounced around a little bit since leaving Texas, I want to say, where he was. But yeah, he slots into first base. The Guardians did send down, or they optioned Calman Zardo, who was already kind of in a bit of a platoon role, but now they've got Lowe there, who still might be platooned. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of switch him out for a righty bat sometimes in different pitching matchups. But nonetheless, both those guys slotting into this Guardians offense that really needed power bats. So I think that's just going to be getting them consistent playing time is good. But I'm curious how it's going to affect their fantasy outlook for the rest of the season. It could be good or bad. I mean, because they're on the Guardians offense, but overall they get more playing time, which I think is just a good thing.
Yeah, I think that it's a good move for the Guardians just to lengthen their lineup a little bit. And a little contrast, they don't typically have a lot of guys with pop in the lineup, so it's nice to put a couple of guys in there. And Lowe and Adell. I think Lowe is kind of the more interesting one here. He is having a really solid season. Obviously, playing in Cincinnati will help with your power, but he's got 12 homers in 85 games, and he's hitting 266, so he's on a nice pace in both those categories. His kind of walk strikeout stuff is pretty similar to years past. He's swinging a little bit harder, and I think he's got his highest barrel rate by a little bit in a couple of years. So he is, making a little bit more, hard and dangerous contact. So yeah, I think if you see a righty heavy week coming up, he makes sense as a streamer at times. But he's still a no speed, first base option who usually hits for a mediocre batting average. So there is some limitations there, but he's worth monitoring. And then Adell, very inconsistent, but he can go on those big heaters. So if you see him heating up and you want to take a flyer, I could completely understand doing that.
He could hit homers in bunches, which is just fun. It's also kind of interesting to see the Angels. I mean, not that they gave up on him because it's been a tough year for the Angels, but kind of the year after his breakout season, that's when they that's when they get rid of him.
Yeah, it was unfortunate his kind of inability to replicate it. But yeah, he could have a big month and it could end up looking, not that different than last year. So we'll see how it finishes for him.
Yeah. All right, one of kind of the I would say a little bit of a breakout ish players this season, Liam Hicks. He is moving across the state from Miami to Tampa Bay. And yeah, he is basically slotting in as the not necessarily the everyday catcher for Tampa Bay. He did play first today, I believe, after playing catcher the day before. But yeah, really, good breakout season from him. He's got 15 homers in 103 games this year. He is batting 282. He's got 66 RBI on the season. And now he goes to the best team in the American League that had a hole at catcher. So, basically is it works out for both sides of the squad. And he is batting cleanup, so he's right behind Junior Caminero, which I think is a fun spot to be. But yeah, this Rays offense, it's really top heavy. Yandy Diaz, Jonathan Aranda, Caminero, Hicks, and then after that, it's a bunch of guys who kind of are okay. Victor Mesa, Chandler Simpson, Cedric Mullins, Richie Palacios, Taylor Walls, and then the occasional, righty bat that will come in off the bench. But yeah, I don't know if this really affects Hicks's fantasy value too much. I mean, he is just going to get, everyday bats in this lineup. And I don't know. Yeah, from a park factor perspective, I don't know if it's really too much of a change. It feels more neutral to me, but yeah, Hicks definitely one of those interesting breakout guys this year, and hopefully this move doesn't really stop that momentum for the rest of the season.
Yeah, the Rays have been looking for a competent catcher for years. I feel like every year they're just running guys out and it doesn't work out. They have some actually good catching prospects, but they lock it up, here with Hicks for a few years because he is, under a lot of team control. I think it's pretty neutral. This just, kind of gave me the opportunity to dive into his profile, and it's so unique, especially at catcher. He never swings and misses. He just does not hit the ball hard. So it's really hard for me to buy into this 20 homer pace that he's on. He really has some of the worst batted ball data in the league. Honestly, like his average exit velo, his barrel rate, they're all really poor. But I guess you can get away with that a little bit when you're only striking out 9% of the time. It's not quite a Luis Arraez level profile, but the contact skills are pretty much still borderline elite. So yeah, I think he's got a chance to continue to hit for solid ratios, but I'm still pretty skeptical in the power department. But he can, yank a fly ball out down the line every once in a while to not be a complete zero there.
Yeah, definitely much more of a positive in OBP leagues, but I mean, even in average leagues, you'll take that 282 any day. Another Rays move, they picked up Freddy Peralta, who, let's just say it wasn't a good season for him this year in New York. And now he goes to the team that is the pitching factory. They didn't do enough to him in the one day he was on the roster, though, because, his first start with Tampa Bay was not very pretty. 3.2 innings, allowed 7 runs on 9 hits, only struck out 3 hitters. But I mean, I think there's a lot of hope, right, for this move in the sense that, like, hey, he came over from Milwaukee. Some people were thinking, hey, maybe he goes back to Milwaukee, but I think the kind of the discourse was they already knew what they had with Peralta, and they were okay to let him go. So maybe kind of a new voice in Tampa Bay could maybe help him improve a little bit this season. His strikeout numbers have gone down this year. He went from a 28% strikeout rate to a 22% strikeout rate this year. So obviously a huge dip there. And that's kind of led to a bunch of inflated numbers everywhere else, a 5.37 ERA, a 1.52 whip, right? These are numbers that, frankly, you would not be rostering this guy in most leagues. So do you think this change of scenery for him and going to an organization like Tampa Bay, is that going to make him rosterable in, let's just say like 12 teamers by, in a couple weeks?
I think it is, but I think it's going to be hard to, I don't think he's going to be left on the waiver wire. So I think you got to add him and just keep him on your bench until you see something turn around if you can afford to do so. Joining a new team in the middle of the season and then your first 2 starts are at Coors and at the A's is about as tough as it gets. So he's going to be, swimming upstream a little bit here in his early days with the Rays. But the Trop's a great place to pitch. I think that those home starts will have some appeal. But yeah, I remember in the offseason we talked about Peralta because he had one of the highest left on base rates in the league. And, his strikeout minus walk rate didn't necessarily fully support his really excellent ratios. So I was expecting some regression, but I wasn't expecting, the skills regression and the luck regression piling up, and it's been really ugly. So yeah, I think maybe, there's some rest of season appeal, but I know it's really hard in leagues to sit a guy on the bench, especially daily leagues when you kind of need almost every start. So yeah, I don't feel like 100% they're going to turn him around. This is it. But I could see, him having some good home starts down the stretch that you want to use.
Yeah, the weird thing for him is like the barrel rate allowed for him went down this season. The hard hit rate allowed went up a little bit this season. Um, but it's just like the lack of strikeouts to me is just kind of the weird thing for him. His walk rate stayed the same, so even though we kind of he has the nickname of Professor Chaos, he wasn't necessarily more chaotic, but he just wasn't striking guys out, and that kind of just led to um, more giving up more hits, right? His average against has leapt a lot. He's given up a little bit more homers this year, but not like so much so that it's like, oh, that's why he's awful. So just kind of a very interesting sort of year from Peralta in the sense of just like how much he's lost that strikeout ability, and that's really hurt in his ability to just kind of suppress runs.
Yeah, gonna be really interesting to see, what kind of contract he gets just coming off such a down year.
Yeah. All right. In terms of pitchers or beleaguered pitchers going to new spots, we have Luis Castillo, who, um, I mean, we talked about it on the pod. I think when Bryce Miller was coming back for Seattle, there's like, what are they going to do with Luis Castillo? Are they going to just like make him a long relief guy, or are they just going to try to get rid of him? Eventually, they did get rid of him, but it was kind of a weird sort of we have like a weird piggyback sort of situation in Seattle for a while, and then I think they went to a 6-man rotation. But nonetheless, he is now in Chicago, and I don't know what to make of this move because Chicago is currently the best team in the AL Central. So there's maybe more wins, but maybe not that much more because Seattle's also a really good team as well. He is making his debut start today as we're recording this, so I haven't seen how that's been going, but nonetheless interested to see how that actually no, he's gone 4 innings. 4 innings, 5
He's
runs,
gone
5
poorly.
strikeouts.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not,
Not
going
well.
So Luis Castillo, it's been a weird year for him, very similar to Peralta actually. 5.06 ERA. The whips climbed up to 1.39. His strikeout rate has already been dropping, right? Last year was a 21.7%. This year 19.4%. So it didn't drop in one year like we saw from Peralta. But nonetheless, it's been a pretty uh, not great year for Castillo, and I was actually kind of buying a buyback during draft season. I was kind of hoping that he'd maybe get back to maybe the year prior, but that has not been the case for Castillo. And now he moves to Chicago, and I just don't know if I feel like this move for him specifically is actually going to improve his fantasy value.
Nope, I don't think it will either. Maybe he'll be pitching more frequently, but Seattle's the best place to pitch in the league, kind of hands down. And he wasn't having success there. So, other than maybe a fresh start, I don't see anything here that will make me more interested in Castillo. And obviously this debut is not doing anything to feed that. So maybe I'll have some streamer use down the stretch, but he's kind of off my radar pretty much right now. It's just been a really, really rough season. And yeah, I'm gonna need to see something before I take that risk.
Yeah, he was a guy who took full advantage of Seattle as well. He had a 43% fly ball rate, very low ground ball rate, 36%. So actually, it's kind of impressive that he didn't actually give up, more runs, more homers than he did. But it's because he played, a bunch of games in T-Mobile Park, and that those dimensions helped him a little bit in being able to suppress some of those long balls. Another pitcher move. This one's interesting because of what the Blue Jays gave up. But they traded for Jose Soriano from the Angels. Soriano had a really incredible start to the season and then has kind of, slowed down a little bit, but he's still, I believe, in the top 40 for Nick, or at least kind of top 50. So still very much a serviceable pitcher. And now he goes to the Blue Jays, who did give up a lot for him, but that's also because he was under team control. And yeah, again, I'll just read off the numbers for him this year. 3.29 ERA, that's a really good number right there. 1.25 WHIP, not so great. 25% strikeout rate, that's pretty good considering that last year he was at a 21% strikeout rate. Overall has picked up 9 wins this season, which is, pretty good for that Angels team, but has only picked up 8 quality starts. So doesn't necessarily go deep into games. But clearly a much more of an improvement compared to last year's season. And I'm interested to see how he does in Toronto. Maybe he gets better opportunities at wins there, definitely better than the Angels for sure. But I don't know if it necessarily changes his peripherals in terms of the ERA or the WHIP moving to Canada.
Yeah, he was on a nice run before the trade to at least right the ship a little bit. I'm just glad to see him in a more competent organization, who can hopefully help him weather these rough stretches a little better. And the Blue Jays, they do seem to be leaning into this archetype of guys with really good stuff who have some control and command issues. Obviously, Cease has been fantastic, and that's kind of his reputation. Trey Savage has some of that to him, and then they acquired Spencer Arrighetti too, who he's had a long history of control problems at the big league level. So maybe they feel like they can work with these guys successfully and get the best out of them. So yeah, I think it's a rest of the season, maybe not a huge change in his value, but just hopefully a more stable kind of arm for the duration of his kind of time under team control. So yeah, I think I'll be more willing to draft him next year, knowing that he's not on the Angels.
Yeah, that's true. That is in and of itself a pretty big boost. The Brewers did eventually get their pitcher. They traded for Dustin May, who I believe is going today, actually. So let's see what his line is. He has gone 6 innings, 5 strikeouts, has given up 1 homer, but only given up 2 earned runs, 3 hits, 3 walks. So not bad in his start for the Brewers. So obviously he goes from a team of the Cardinals to the Brewers, so he gets a little bit more of a win opportunity here in Milwaukee. Had 5 on the season, but overall the numbers weren't necessarily that great for him. 4.38 ERA, which is a little bit of improvement from last year, which is kind of funny. The WHIP also improvement from last year, went from 1.42 to 1.28. And then a 23% strikeout rate, which actually is an improvement as well. So he definitely did right the ship a little bit in St. Louis. Now, granted, I think that's because in 2025 he did play both in Los Angeles and in Boston. So Boston, not the best place for a pitcher to go to, but nonetheless, much better year this year in St. Louis. And now he goes to Milwaukee, who they seem to be able to make changes to a pitcher pretty quickly. We saw Kyle Harrison go over there from Boston, and we just read, Kyle Harrison's line at the top of the pod. Really good improvement from him this season. So, yeah, Dustin May, there definitely can be some improvement for him in just the next couple months in Milwaukee. I really like this trade for his fantasy value, but I'm curious whether. Hopefully he stays in Milwaukee. I think that could be very interesting, but I'm curious to see how Milwaukee will change him, if at all, for the next couple months.
Yeah, I think he was throwing a lot of cutters today in his start, which has been a decent kind of offering for him this year. Four seamer has been used a little bit more in the cutter, but it seems like maybe he'll go cutter first with the Brewers. But yeah, it's a good development situation. Their pitchers really rack up a lot of strikeouts, so I think he'll be really solid at home, especially. And yeah, he actually has had some nice skills growth this year. He's got a 15% K minus walk, which is above average for a starter. So yeah, I think it could be a kind of a good buy lower if he is on your waivers in some shallower leagues. I'd be happy to go get him. It's at the Padres next week, which is a nice matchup too. So yeah, I have him in a league or two, and I'm happy about this move for him.
Yeah. A couple reliever moves. So we had Luke Weaver and Camilo Doval reunited, I believe, actually. Now they're in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh desperately needed some relief pitching because they got rid of, who was it? Was it Dennis Santana and Gregory Soto are both no longer on the team? Or I might be making that up about
Santana. I think Soto's still there, but he's been struggling.
Soto is still there.
Here and there.
That's right. Yeah. But Weaver kind of slots in. We'll see if he slots in as the closer there. Camilo Doval, a little bit more wild, but obviously still a good arm for him. But yeah, I guess we'll talk about Weaver. Do you think? I guess where do you think his value lies in right now? Obviously, he was with the Mets. Now he's with the Pirates. He probably has more opportunities at saves, I think. But it also remains to be seen whether he's actually going to get the bulk share of the saves now in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously awesome in holds leagues. His ratios are great, and he's got a 20% K minus walk. I think in terms of the saves, I think it's either him or Montgomery. I think Soto's kind of been relegated to more middle inning, high leverage work as opposed to the ninth. So I could see Weaver getting the majority of the saves, just being the righty in the bullpen versus Montgomery, the lefty. But it is looking like a timeshare, at least at this point. So that can be frustrating to deal with. But yeah, definitely a better path to saves than when he was with the Mets with Devin Williams. Not pitching great, but still getting pretty much all the save looks for the team.
Yeah, and then for Doval, I mean, it's been kind of a weird year for him. His strikeout rate has dropped. Went up from 26% last year to 22% this year. This is also the second time he's been traded in as many years, too. So lacking some stability as well, which is kind of unfortunate for him. I mean, some of the peripheral numbers aren't too bad, I guess. Actually, no, they're all not great. It's his strikeout rate, as I mentioned, went down, but ground ball rate's up a little bit this year. Yeah, ultimately, it hasn't been a very good year for Doval, and he probably has some value in holds leagues, but probably not enough, I think, to be, going to pick him up because of this team change.
Yeah, I think I'd want to see him, string together a few scoreless outings before adding him or considering it.
Yeah. And then finally, Jeff Hoffman going from the Toronto Blue Jays to my Minnesota Twins, who this year have not had anyone at catcher for a consistent amount of time. I think they have, it's either 12 or 13 different pitchers have picked up a save so far this season. So having a guy like Hoffman probably is going to be a good thing for the Twins in being able to just have someone who's been stable. That being said, Yendrys Gomez has been a little bit of revelation this year. And I believe, how many saves does he have on the season now? He's got 14, which is definitely team leading. So nonetheless, it's not like Hoffman is like guaranteed to close every single game because I think they like what they have from Gomez. But yeah, interesting move here. I think Hoffman had kind of lost the closer job this season to Louis Varland. And so now this gives him an opportunity at least to pick up more saves. I think that makes him a little bit more viable in fantasy leagues. And target field's like kind of an okay place to pitch as well. So yeah, I think this helps his value just a little bit, but again, I don't think this makes him like like a top 10 closer or anything like that at this point. He's still kind of maybe in that top 20 or top 15 probably conversation right now.
Yeah, I think I saw a quote from the manager that said that Gomez is he's not the only closer, but if he's rested, he's going to get the opportunity, which I was kind of surprised by, but good for him. He has been solid in the role. But yeah, Hoffman's only allowed earned runs in one appearance since June 6th. So he had a really bad start to the season, and obviously Varland took the role and didn't look back. But Hoffman has actually been quietly really excellent for the last 2 months. So, I could see a kind of a two-headed type situation in the back of the bullpen there.
Yeah, it's good. Like they've been doing bullpen by committee writ large this entire season, so I'm sure Derek Shelton's just like, hey, that's what we've done the entire year. There's no reason for us to necessarily stop now just because we have an elite, a guy who could be an elite closer, right? Like we'll pitch the matchups where they make sense. Both of them are righties necessarily, so it's not like one has a platoon advantage over the other. So probably just like whoever they feel like has the hot hand at the time, probably that's the guy that they're going to be setting in to close the ninth. But yeah, I'm very curious on how all this is going to affect the Twins. Obviously, they also picked up AJ Minter, who I think that's a sneaky good pickup in like some holds leagues. But yeah, at least the bullpen looks decent now with both Gomez and Hoffman potentially able to pitch the eighth and the ninth, and I like that as a Twins fan. I think from fantasy perspective, though, maybe a little bit of bump to Hoffman, maybe a little bit of a drop to Gomez, but overall, I don't know if it changes their value too much that I'm going out and grabbing a guy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right. All right. So yeah, that's a review of the trade deadline. A lot of good moves for sure. A lot of just kind of like for fantasy. But nonetheless, obviously some of the things that you need to keep track of a guy who got moved. And I know for me, it's been kind of a fun week of figuring out who's pitching when because of all these changes. I'm in an ESPN league, so you can kind of load up on starts on Sunday. So that's been a little bit of a puzzle to try to figure out when guys are going and who to pick up so that I can get a Sunday start. But yeah, we're gonna move on to streamers. We did have a couple guys go a couple weeks ago that didn't completely finish out their week. So yeah, how are we looking in terms of the streaming record from the last couple weeks?
Yeah, so I'd say 1 win, 3 losses from the guys 2 weeks ago. Zach Thornton was fine and got a win, but rougher ratio, so he gave that a loss. Tatsuya Imai obviously had a bad outing, and he got the loss. Christian Scott had a no decision in 6 innings with 7 Ks, 1 earned, and a 1 whip. So he was the lone win. And then Brandon Sproat also had a mediocre first start and lost his second one. So he was the loss. The guys from last week, Christian Scott, Brandon Sproat, and Patrick Sandoval. We'll recap those next week. Looking like maybe 2-1, but we'll see how it goes. This week, yeah, a couple of interesting guys. One very deep, two more mainstream, I'd say. First one, Hayden Wesneski of the Astros, fresh off the IL a couple starts ago. Only 7% Yahoo, 21% CBS as a result of the injury, but nice two-step coming up here at the Giants and home against the Mariners, so feel good about that one. Keter Montero back in the Tigers rotation after some trades and injuries. 36% Yahoo, 57% CBS. He's only a one start, but it's home against Cleveland. He doesn't have a super high K ceiling, but has been really reliable in ratios. And then getting deep, going a little bit of a shot here. Gabriel Hughes of the Rockies. He's a recently promoted prospect. 2% Yahoo, 4% CBS. Might be the only time I recommend a Rocky in this segment, but it seems like a good opportunity. He's got 2 road starts at Arizona and at the Giants. So 2 weaker offenses, 2 decent venues to pitch in. So, deeper NL only, right? I think probably some main events. People will be taking a shot on Gabriel Hughes here. He's just been really tough to square up so far in his first couple starts. So interested to see how that goes. And then 2 more highly rostered guys that I wouldn't consider streamers because of rostership, but just wanted to point them out because they have great matchups. Landon Roop home against the Rockies and Dustin May at the Padres. So 2 guys who have been a little inconsistent, but really nice matchups for them there. So if they are out there in your shallower leagues, definitely go grab them up.
Yeah, the Roop inconsistency hurt me in fantasy this past week, and that was not fun. But yeah, he does have the ability to turn it on. And if it's not for my fantasy team, maybe it's at least for your fantasy team. I did want to give an honorable mention. Not that this guy should be necessarily streamed right now, but Jamison Tyone, our kind of the legendary guy in our streamer segment. He is now with Toronto. He did not have a great start with them though in his first start. It was 4 innings, 4 strikeouts, 3 runs, 2 walks. So still very much a matchup dependent guy, but nonetheless nice to see Tyone. Get on another major league team, and specifically a Canadian team for him after getting DFA'd by Chicago.
Yeah, he's got the 2-step week coming up, and I really wanted to recommend it, but I gotta see it a little bit first before we go back in on our guy.
Yeah, it has not. This season has not been very kind to him. So hopefully he's able to turn around. By the end of the season. But anyways, that is it for this episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. Again, you can find us on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. You can send us your comments and questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. You can find myself on Twitter at the John Cut. You can find Patrick at pfitzgerald_99. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitcher List podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you listen to your podcast, and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Lastly, sign up for Pitcher List Pro. By doing so, you can join us in the Pitcher List Discord, get advice from all the fantasy experts and writers over there. Discord was blowing up over the trade deadline as expected. Super fun just to kind of react to all the guys there while it was happening live. So still a lot of baseball to go for the rest of the season. Definitely join us in the Discord if you haven't already. But yeah, that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. For Patrick, I'm John. We'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.